And I'm hitting live now. There is a delay. It's a pretty decent sized delay, and I've just kind of given up trying to trick it into starting at the exact right time. So we are now live on YouTube. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to the WPAMA. My name is Allie Nimmons, and I will be your host for today. In case you don't know, this is a weekly live video series where I sit down with a really interesting person. I collect your questions ahead of time, and we ask those questions live. If you're just tuning in and you have any questions for our speaker today, please leave them in the chat here on YouTube, and I'll be monitoring those questions, and we will make sure to get to those. This episode is going to be available to watch here on our YouTube channel. If you miss any portion, and captions are going to be included within the next 24 to 48 hours in case that's something that you need or want. And make sure you stay until the end because we are actually giving out, usually we give away a random prize out of our WP Buffs store, but today we are giving away the actual, well, not the literal one, but the mug that Joe is holding. Which this is our first non-WP Buffs gift. So I'm talking to Joe Casabona today. Joe, tell us a little bit about you and who you are and what you do, and a little bit about the mug that we're going to give away to one of our listeners.
Yes, well, thank you for having me, Allie. This is really exciting. I love the work you've been doing on YouTube. I've been following your channel, so I gave it a nice shout out during my live stream earlier today. So hopefully some people are coming over.
Thank you.
I'll do the more interesting thing first, which is the Yeti tumbler. I'm like obsessed with Yeti tumblers. And so I got one with my podcast Liftoff logo, the rocket mic on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got one custom for me. I'll be placing an order for a few more soon. So I figure I'll give one away along with, and I didn't tell you this, but I just launched my my podcast membership. So I'll also be giving away access to the membership, and that includes this member chip. So you'll get a year free along with this poker chip.
Nice. Thank you so much, Joe. That's so exciting. Way better than just a t-shirt.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I am Joe Casabona. I am a podcaster, educator, and WordPress developer in that order, which is the opposite of how it used to be. I used to work for an agency and I used to develop full time, and I'm a master's in software engineering. But somewhere along the way, I decided I wanted to teach more than I wanted to code. So I left my agency job in 2017, shortly after my daughter was born. Best time to introduce economic uncertainty in your life is when you have a newborn. So I've been making money by creating online courses, making WordPress sites, and primarily through podcasting. I have a podcast called How I Built It, and I have a course called Podcast Liftoff.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I'm really happy to have you here. You are one of the first WordPress friends that I made. I was on your podcast, How I Built It, a couple of years ago. That was like kind of right when I started getting my feet wet with the WordPress community. And it was a really great opportunity for me. So it's awesome to be able to now have you on my show.
Awesome. That's
so
like
exciting.
we met at WordCamp Miami, right? Like shortly before that. And our interview was one of the more personal interviews I think that I've done, because like we talked about like actual issues instead of like how'd you build that plugin. And I really feel like that was like a turning point for the show, because we talked more about that. Like Michelle Schulp came on shortly after that, and we talked about like fitness and mental health, and that was also one of my most popular episodes, the one that you were on. So thanks for that. Yeah,
I didn't know that. Yeah, we talked about like we talked about mental health also. We talked about like kind of genderism in the tech industry, and like my story a little bit. And yeah, it was really cool to have this platform where someone was just like, tell me about all of these things that most people kind of don't want to hear about. So that's so cool. I'm glad to hear that that was a successful episode for sure. Well, today our topic is going to be pretty primarily focused on podcasting. You, in my mind, are like the podcast guy. Like I go to you for podcast questions. I've actually started using Castos based on your recommendation for the secret podcast that I have with my husband. Did I tell you about that?
No.
Yeah, I have my husband and I have a Dungeons and Dragons podcast.
Oh, that's awesome. I knew you
that we
asked
do just for
about
fun.
Castos. I assumed it was for WP Buffs. I did not know it was like a super cool. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. I feel like
I think
that's
you
like
would really like it.
I think so. I feel like that's a real hit to my nerd cred. Like, and
Mhm.
one of my students told me, like when I was teaching at the University of Scranton, one of my students was like, you've never played Dungeons and Dragons, you're not a real nerd. I'm like, son, I've been a nerd since you were in diapers.
Okay.
Still, still, I feel like that's a little bit of a hit to my nerd cred because I've never played.
I think you definitely get more nerd points if you play Dungeons and Dragons, but I'm not into that gatekeeper. You're like, oh, you're not a
Yeah,
nerd if you
you're
don't
not
blah
a
blah
real
blah. Like
nerd.
I
Oh,
only
that's
recently got into D&D through my
yeah.
husband. So anyway, yeah, enough about that. Enough of me. I'll tell you more about that later. But
All right.
let's go ahead and dive into these questions. Again, if you're watching and you have questions for Joe, please put them in the comments and I'll make sure to grab those. So the very first question that we have on the list: what podcasts or podcast do you listen to every episode as soon as they get released?
Ooh, what a great question. There are three. Three?
Okay.
Yes. One is Upgrade with Jason Snell and Mike Hurley because they cover
Mhm.
like current tech events. But what differentiates their show in my mind is they also have a segment called Upstream where they talk about like streaming and TV services,
Mm.
and that's very interesting to me. The other one is Cortex. That is with CGP Grey and Mike Hurley. Um, and that's all about like productivity and
Mm.
journaling and things like that. And the third is Advisory Opinions, very different. Advisory Opinions with Sarah Isger and David French.
Mhm.
They are both lawyers, and they talk about mostly like what the goings ons of the Supreme Court, and
Wow.
now they're covering like the impeachment trial and stuff like that. But they're a little right of center. Like we really jive um, viewpoint wise, but they are super entertaining. They are
Mm.
they present the facts objectively first and make it very clear when they're going to give what they think their opinions are. And Sarah
Mm.
Isger in particular is like one of my favorite political commentators like on the planet. She's so funny and extremely smart, and it's my favorite podcast I think to listen to.
Awesome. I love it. I haven't heard of any of those, but now I definitely feel like I want to go check those out. I only have one, and it's called Stuff You Should Know. And
Great podcast.
yeah, that's the only one that I'm like, I'm going to listen to every episode. I'm going to listen to episodes more than one time. Like, that is my absolute favorite podcast in the whole world.
So fun side quest. I went
Mhm.
to a live Stuff You Should Know live in the before time.
I'm
Um,
so
yeah, a
jealous.
bunch of my friends live in New York City, so I was like, guys, let's like go to Brooklyn. I think is where they had it.
The Bell
It must have
House?
been Manhattan. Yeah, the Bell House. Yeah. And let's do it. It was the one with where they talked about Edward Bernays, which was super interesting. The PR like
Mhm.
uh
Yeah, the PR one.
yeah, and they talked about Chuck doing his Italian accent. And he's like, I'll say like, who has an Italian name? And I was like, Joe Casabona. So Chuck did my name in his like funny Italian accent. I'm like, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That, gosh, I'm so jealous. That's one of the, probably the, one of the most like niche things that I'm a huge fangirl of, or
Yeah.
things that I feel like not a lot of people are fans of. And yeah, I would kill to go to one of their live shows. I think that they're just the best.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's move on to question number two. Um, this one's a little bit more maybe technical, less personal. What do you think is the number one mistake that most people make with their podcasts?
I think you said one. It's kind of gonna be two.
Okay.
The first is I think people get hung up on gear too early
Mhm.
on in the process. Like they're like, I gotta find the perfect microphone. I blogged about this recently. The next YouTube I have video I have coming out tomorrow is like a microphone shootout where it's like, can you sound better with a $20 microphone? Um, you can sound better than the built-in microphone. Spoiler alert. So I think people get too hung up on gear, but honestly, I think the main problem or the main mistake that people do make is that they don't record a demo first.
Mhm.
The concept of a demo like crystallized for me thanks to Mike Hurley, one of the co-founders of Relay FM, and his co-founder Stephen Hackett. Um, they talked about the importance of doing a demo because like you don't know, especially because they do like host co-host for most of their shows. You don't
Mhm.
know how the chemistry is going to work, but also the first few episodes are just like you kind of finding your sea legs, and if you can do those privately, and like really get something going, then I think you'll be more confident for your first like real episode. So even like I didn't do a demo for my first episode. And at the end of it, you could tell I was like less animated, even though I was talking to like a good friend of mine, Jason Coleman, from Paid Memberships Pro. And then at the end, I'm like, I don't even know how to sign off. And Jason was like, what about like get out there and build something was Jason's suggestion. Like I feel like I owe him like a royalty because I have a trademark on that now. So I think doing a demo episode really helps you nail down the format and like the type of voice that you want to have, and then you can kind of dial in like how you sound on the microphone, and it's just like a good practice session, right? Because at WordCamp New York City, actually the one where you took that great picture of me with the caption behind me, do you remember this? It's like the caption says, "Sorry for the person transcribing me, I talk weird and fast." And it's just like the most perfect picture of me. But at that event, someone asked like, how do you get more comfortable in front of the microphone? And I just said like, get your reps in. Like the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll feel. So if you do a few demo episodes, 1 or 2 or 3 before going live, you'll sound more confident like right off the bat, and you'll feel more comfortable.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I totally agree. Having just recently started a podcast. So every time you sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons, it's considered a session. So we did a set, and there's something called session 0, where you get together with the other players and you talk about the game you want to play and trigger warnings and your characters and what people want out of the game and stuff like that. So we did a session 0 episode where we kind of did like a little teaser trailer where we talked about what we were going to talk about. And yeah, it was really nice to have a little practice one to get used to our little janky mic setup and, you know, talking over each other, because we talk over each other constantly, and we were like, oh, we can't do that now. So
yeah, do you play, like, is the episodes of like you playing?
No, so that's actually like a running joke, is like we're a D&D episode where nobody plays D&D. Basically, the concept is I ask, he has been playing Dungeons & Dragons forever. He is literally a professional dungeon master. Like he gets paid by people to DM games.
Wow.
And so I ask him questions. Like I'll have a question every episode. It's called Rollmates. I'm going to plug it because this is the podcast episode. So I feel like there's an excuse.
That's amazing.
It's called Rollmates. And so I just ask him a question and he explains to me and to the listeners like that facet of D&D. And yeah, it's a cute little, it's very conversational. It's kind of like Stuff You Should Know, where we just sit and chat and yeah, he explains stuff to me, which is really awesome. Fun.
I love the name. That's so funny.
Thank you. I thought about it for a very, very long time. It's very punny. Okay, cool. Enough about me.
Actually, this might be of interest to you. There's a podcast. I didn't mean to mention Mike Hurley on this podcast 1,000 times, but he's like a very good podcaster. And he's on a podcast called, he's a professional podcaster, so this is like all he does all day, called Total Party Kill, where I think they play like D&D games on the podcast. So that might be interesting to you or your Rollmates listeners. So
yeah, very cool. Check that out. Cool. Okay. And I apologize in advance to anyone watching. My internet connection today is a little bit crappy, so we might go in and out a little bit, but should be fine. Oh, Diego is here. Diego is actually a WordPress engineer over at WP Buffs, and he's just saying hey in the comments. Hey Diego, let us know if you have a question. Cool. All right, so let's move on to question 3, which, funnily enough, what are your, and you just kind of spoke to this a little bit, but we'll go back on that. What are your 3 must-have pieces of podcasting gear?
Ooh, great question. A decent microphone. Again, doesn't have to be like the one I'm talking into right now is like a $200 shotgun microphone, and this is the Shure SM7B, which is like a lot of podcasters podcast microphone. You can get a decent microphone for $100 or less, and I think that's really important because there's not a top level, right? Like you don't have to sound like NPR or whoever, but there's definitely a bottom level, and that bottom level is the built-in microphone. Like you don't want to sound like you're recording in a bathroom stall, right? Or like Allie and I were talking in the pre-show before, like the headphone, like it's like it could brush up against your shirt, or you're wearing like these long earrings, and so you want something that's like not necessarily messing up my autofocus, attached to your face, that sounds good, and a dynamic microphone is what you want because it's better for like non-sound booth environments. It's very forgiving of your environment. I recommend the ATR 2100X. It's a really good sub $100 USB microphone. So I think that's really important. Next up is headphones. You want to have headphones because you don't want the sound coming out of your computer and back into your microphone. I know that people will say, oh, that never happens to me. It happens to you, and I know because my editor always tells me, and then he has to charge me more to get it out. So, which is fine. Like if you don't have headphones and you don't podcast all the time, like it can be fixed. But if you're going to do this regularly, headphones are super important. You can hear yourself. You can make sure you're talking into the right microphone, and you're not going to have that echo. And then third is a pop filter. And I'm going to try to demonstrate why a pop filter is important. So I'm going to bring this down. You can see the windscreen, but if I say but, or I meant but like and not like, but anyway,
I know. So
or I say like I'm going to get some lemon poppy seed dressing. You hear that gust of air, right? You hear like that sound. A pop filter, a boom arm doesn't necessarily need it because it's not right in front of your face. But a pop filter will fix that. It diverts the air, so you're not getting, they're called plosives, into the microphone. If you don't have a pop filter and you're going to record like today, simple trick is to take a pencil and just put it right in front of your mouth, and then it diverts the air enough. So like poppy seed, it kind of like prevents that a little bit. So microphone, headphones, pop filter, I think are the most important things. I just realized I used one of my favorite pencils here. It's it's
cool.
from Blackwing. Yeah, it's the presidential pencil series, and I started using this pencil, I don't know, in October, maybe November. But it says, may none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. So one of my favorite pencils.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it. Cool. Yeah, I agree with all of those things. I also really, really personally want to get like the arm that you have on your mic right now.
Yeah.
The arms that we use, we don't have those. And so our mics sit on our desk, which really sucks because anytime you move and hit the table, it makes a noise. So yeah, personally, my number 4 is going to be an arm like you have.
I was going to say that's my number 4. I think that the pop filter will probably do more for your sound quality, but this probably looks weird because I'm not talking into this microphone. But yeah, the boom arm, especially if you're like live streaming and you're typing or something, having it out of the way is good. So this is the Rode PS1. This is like $100, and I bought this because I was originally using the Blue Yeti microphone, and that's like really heavy, so I wanted a stronger one. But the one that my shotgun mic is on is made by Newer, and it's like $13.
Wow.
And that's gonna work for most microphones. Yeah.
Nice. I might ask you for a link to that because we need one.
Yes, I will. You know what I'll do? I'll send you a link to my kit.co website. I have a bunch of different streaming kits there.
Nice. Yeah, Diego just asked in the chat if you can share the mic model to the shotgun one that you're using. Is that on that list?
Yes, that is on the YouTube live stream setup. It's the Audio Technica condenser mic, the AT8035.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah,
Full
so
disclosure,
definitely
those kit.co links are affiliate links. That's like the whole purpose of kit.co.
No worries. So I will definitely put that link in the description of the video below after this video is completed. Awesome. So let's go on to question number 4. I really like this question. It's more of a marketing type of thing. The podcasting world is pretty saturated right now. How can you make sure that your podcast stands out?
I love this question because it feels saturated. And so I like when people ask this because yes, you do definitely need to make your podcast stand out. But I also like to lay this stat on people. There are like 32 million YouTube channels, and there are less than 2 million active podcasts.
Mm,
So for people who listen to a lot of podcasts, it feels like they're a dime a dozen, but really there's not a lot. And I think about 50% of America listens to podcasts. So there's like still plenty of room to grow. So that's the first thing I'll say. If you are thinking about starting a podcast, but you're like, it's saturated, start your podcast. I think now is an absolute great time to do it too, because more people are getting into it. As far as making your podcast stand out, um, back in the early to mid 2000s, people were having this conversation about blogs too. They're like, why would I start a politics blog? Huffington Post and Drudge Report cover it all, right? Or Hot Air or
mm,
whatever. Um, or why would I start a cooking blog? There are already cooking blogs.
mhm,
Your voice cannot be replicated. So you can talk about the same things, but they won't talk about it the same way you talk about it.
mhm,
So I think that's really important. When you are coming to podcast, be yourself and be passionate about whatever you're talking about, right? If you're just starting a podcast because you think this particular topic will make money, people are going to see through that pretty quickly. So be passionate, use your voice, and be consistent. I think those are really the important things, right? Podcasting is a grind, but if you're going to say I'm going to podcast, I'm going to put out an episode every 2 weeks, do it every 2 weeks. That consistently will show people that consistency will show people that you are showing up and you are ready, and you're taking it seriously, and they'll take it seriously. And then the last tip I would say is podcast people who listen to podcasts are usually also doing something else, right? Most people
mhm,
aren't like sitting quietly in their room listening to a podcast. Um,
mhm,
so make sure you have a goal for each episode, that you want to impart some tip, some takeaway, and repeat it. So
mhm,
if I go into this episode going, I want people to know that I feel my Patreon failed because I overpromised and underdelivered, I will say that multiple times throughout the episode so that if people remember one thing, it'll be don't overpromise and then underdeliver.
mhm. Nice. That's all super duper helpful. Awesome. And I think what hit me really hard in there, you mentioned like choosing something that you're passionate about because it is a grind, and I think it's easier to push through when it gets difficult if you're actually talking about something you like to talk about. Like if you're talking about something you don't care about to begin with and then it's getting tedious, like why would you continue to do it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard, right? Like when I taught in the classroom, I taught a course called computer literacy. Every freshman had to take it, and it was basically like an intro to computer class. And one lesson I had to teach was to teach students how to convert from decimal base 10 to binary base 2. And I taught it, and I'm like, I don't care about this. I'm not going to test them on this. When are they ever going to use this? And so, like,
Yeah.
it was the hardest thing I taught all semester. And it was something that I feel the kids weren't ever going to use. And so, uh,
Yeah.
it made it hard for me to want to teach it. And I just replaced it with like social media etiquette, like something actually important
Mhm.
that, like, if more people taught, maybe like Twitter wouldn't be such a terrible place a lot of the time.
There you go. Very true. All right. So questions 5 and 6 are very similar, so I'll just kind of group them together. How long should your podcast be, and how often should you podcast? And I can already kind of feel like it probably depends on what your podcast is or what you're talking about, but maybe there are some kind of general best practices.
Yes. So as far as how often, there are kind of less statistics around that. Just as long as you're consistent. So I know some podcasts that are monthly because
Mm-hmm.
that's like the flow of the show, and that's how often they can do it, and like it's just like life updates. So like weekly updates are like weird sometimes because like, oh, nothing
Mm.
happened since last week, right? Um, and then some are daily, some are twice a week, right? I think Stuff You Should Know is twice a week. Um,
Um, Technically 4 times a week because they have 2 full episodes,
they have
a
short
short
stuff.
stuff, and then like the old
Yeah,
episode that
like
they
from the
repost every
archives.
Saturday. So
Yeah, right.
yes,
And like,
technically they post 4 times a week, but it's really only like 3.5 episodes that they
yeah,
record.
right, yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, they've been doing it for so long and they have like so much stuff to talk about. They probably have a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. The same thing
Mhm.
with Stuff You Missed in History Class. They do something similar. I think it's like 2 full episodes, and then like they have a behind the scenes episode every Friday, which is super cool. And then they do
Cool.
like the classic episode. So yeah, Stuff You Missed in History Class is super neat too. Really love that podcast. So anyway, how often it should work with your schedule as long as you are consistent.
Hmm.
Because again, if you say like, oh, podcasts are weekly, I need to do it every week, that puts pressure on you to come up with stuff, and then you're not going to want to do it. And
Yeah.
that's not the point of podcasting. Um, and then how long should it be?
Hmm.
So statistics show that the ideal length is around 25 minutes because that is also the average length of a commute. Now, these stats were
Mm.
taken in the before time when people were commuting. But I usually give the frustrating teacher answer, which is make it however long you think it needs to be. I listen to podcasts that are 5-10 minutes. I
Hmm.
listen to podcasts that are 2+ hours. Cortex, I'm a member of Cortex, so I have access to their Mortex podcast.
Hmm.
So they do a post show there. They usually go 2 hours. The post show is an extra 15 minutes. And I'm there for it. I usually listen to it in segments because weirdly, when I'm watching my kids, they don't care to listen to podcasts. Um, so
Wow,
uh,
rude.
I know, right? I'm like, kids, I'm trying to listen. Just go play by yourself for a minute. No. So I usually listen like in the morning before they wake up and after they go to bed. But um, I'm there for the whole show, even if I can't listen to it all in one shot. So if you have content that fills 40 minutes, great. If you have content that fills 15 minutes, that's great too. As long as your listeners have something to take away.
Awesome. I love it. And then last question that I have, but again, I'm keeping an eye on the chat to see if we have any others coming in. I really, really like this one. Interview style podcasts are really popular in the WordPress community right now. Do you think that there's room to move away from that format into something different?
Ooh, that is a good question. And so you said the WordPress community specifically, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So I feel like this is gonna seem like I'm ripping off Matt Medeiros twice in like a couple of weeks, even though I thought about it. Um, but my WordPress year in review project just wrapped up, and there's the podcast side of it, and I enjoyed that because it kind of how I built it is moving away from just WordPress. It's focusing more on small business owners and like actionable tech tips for small business owners. Um,
Hmm.
and so I want to have more WordPress specific content. This is like an exclusive. I haven't told anybody this anywhere else. But I think I'm going to make the WordPress review podcast a more regular one. And I'm thinking like monthly for now, right?
Hmm.
Start kind of slow, manage expectations. And so I will put like relevant WordPress interviews over there, but also like I'm thinking like news and first looks and stuff like that. My YouTube channel has a lot of that stuff because it's like demos, but um, just a place for me to kind of wax poetic about WordPress. Matt just did the
Hmm.
same thing. Like he's releasing I think he's calling it the WP Minute, and it's I think his is daily, like a daily
Mm.
5 minute podcast. I don't know.
Wow.
I mean, I guess he just podcasts for a living now. So, um, but to answer your question, yes, I think there is. I think that there's lots of room for focusing on WordPress without it being interviews, right? So, um, we can talk about what we're missing out at WordCamps right now, right? Maybe we have like a podcast that kind of focuses on WordCamp talks, or maybe even they are WordCamp talks, right? It's like some
Hmm.
kind of you pick a topic and you go deep in that topic for 30 or 40 minutes. Um, Bob Dunn, right? Bob WP is focusing fully on WooCommerce, and I think it's mostly interviews at least. Which, by the way, Bob, if you're watching, uh, I'm a little disappointed you didn't call the WooCommerce reunion the reunion. Like I feel
Oh
like you
God.
really could have. I know, right? um, the dad jokes are very strong with me. But like if you focus on the WooCommerce news aspect of it too, and I think maybe Bob is doing that.
Mhm.
I just see the interviews more often, or the analysis, right? I think that WordPress is rapidly maturing. There's been a ton of acquisitions in the last couple of years. Full site editing and the block editor are changing quickly. E-commerce grew 77% last year,
Wow.
and WooCommerce powers 1 in 4 e-commerce sites. So I think we can do more news style analysis, like what we see honestly in the Apple podcast, like in the Apple tech news space, right? Those were like
Mhm.
all the first podcasts, ATP, Upgrade to an extent, and all of these other, the This Week in Tech like covers that. I think if you look at This Week in Tech, twit.tv, and you see what they do, we can do that in the WordPress space. So the Laportes, if you're watching, I'd be happy to do This Week in WordPress over on twit.tv. But
Nice.
I think that if you look at the kind of stuff they do, you can focus in the WordPress space on that. So it doesn't just need to be interviews.
Mhm.
It can be, because a podcast doesn't need to be one format. You can do an interview here, you can do some quick news there. You can kind of combine episodes, but I think there's a lot of space for the WordPress podcast space to evolve, especially because at least for the next year, we're not going to have any really any in-person events.
Yeah. And I think it's the question really leads into like an email that I opened just this morning from the gents at Master WP, where
Yeah.
I learned that Josepha Hayden is starting a podcast. The what is she? The executive director of WordPress. It's called
Yeah.
WP Briefing, and co-founder of WordPress, Matt Mullenweg, is starting a podcast called The WordPress Community, which I think is a little rich. Um, and both of those do sound really interesting. And it seems like neither one of them are interview formats. Have you heard a lot or investigated into? Actually, wait a second, I misread this. The WordPress Community is an episode with Matt Mullenweg on Meridos's
Oh yeah,
podcast. I
Matt's
thought it was.
podcast. Yeah.
I thought Mullenweg
But
was starting a podcast.
oh
He already has
yeah,
one
he
technically.
has one, right? It's
Um,
called Distributors or something. But there
mhm,
you go. There's an idea for a podcast. Start a
mhm.
podcast called WP Community. Talk about all the community aspects of WordPress. It could be interviews. It could just be what's going on. I'm really excited for Josepha's
Yeah,
because I think, first of all, she's amazing. I think she's super great.
she's the
Um,
best.
like right, and I'm sorry, I'm like gushing a little bit.
No, I'm
Um,
obsessed with her. I
yeah,
don't blame you.
she's like super cool and like real. Like I just great person. And WP Briefing as a podcast, I think I think she's the perfect person to do it. I think it's like every 2 weeks. I think that's a really good cadence for that
Mhm,
podcast. And so yeah, I I think that um that's really fantastic, and I think there's even more room, right? I think like post status, I gotta talk to Crossguard, right? Because I know that they tried doing more with post status, but I feel like post status can kind of be that too for like more WordPress developer-y things, because the podcast that was hosted on the Tavern for a while that I forget the name of now, and I'm real sorry to
Yeah, I
Jeff
don't
and J
remember
Trip.
either.
Um, I think that a format like that is good, but kind of as my show was considered a WordPress podcast for a while, but it's moving out of that. It's not strictly WordPress anymore. Matt Medeiros is doing the same thing, kind of moving into like he's calling it the blue collar digital worker, and I think
Mhm.
that should make way for more and other voices in the WordPress community to start shows, um, and get out there and like establish expertise. Kim Doyle, I think she does a really good WordPress focused podcast. I think she renamed. Did she rename it the Kim Doyle Show, or she named it from the Kim Doyle Show to something else? Um,
I'm not sure. I'm
she's been
doing a
doing it
Google search to
for
try and find it, and I
yeah.
can't. But
She's been doing it forever.
I'm sure you're onto something.
Yeah.
Kim
Yeah.
Doyle from WP Elevation.
I don't know if she's does she work for? She does the content planner, content creators planner.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, this is if I knew I was going to talk about her, I would have had these emails
Yeah, the
ready.
Kim Doyle show.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it was. Oh right. It was called the WP Chick podcast, and
Mm,
then she renamed it to the Kim Doyle show.
I like that
Um.
better.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So, and I mean, like, it's. I tell people like not to name podcasts after yourself because people don't know who you are, so who cares? But Kim's been doing it
Sure.
for a long time, so people know who she is, and they're on that feed, and this allows her to uh, take it in a different direction if she wants. But I guess this was like a long rambling answer, but I think that there is a lot of space in the WordPress community for people to do more podcasts that aren't just interviews, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
first of all, interview shows are a lot of work. If you do a solo show, it's a little easier because you don't need to coordinate with someone's schedule. You can make it shorter and just pick a topic you want to talk about, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you do client work in the WordPress space
Mm-hmm.
and you do that every day, pick a case study a week, and you don't have to go deep. You could just say, "Hey, I did this cool thing with Elementor last week," or
Mm-hmm.
I was working on this project and they had like 1,000 or let's say 100,000 spam comments, and I had to figure out a way to delete them. That's a real thing I had to deal with a few years ago. Um, and little things like that are quick, they're informative, and you don't need a lot of prep time because the actual prep time was you doing the billable work. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's actionable advice for people who are listening. And
Yeah.
that's take the transcript, make it a blog post. Now you have two pieces of content from one story that you told on a podcast.
Yeah. That's really good advice.
It's good. I should write that
Alrighty.
down. That sounds like a blog post for me.
Yeah, it does. Oh yeah, Aruba uh, called out WordPress chick Kim Doyle.
Oh,
I
cool.
missed that comment. Thank you, Aruba.
Hi,
Um,
Aruba. If this
Hi,
is the same
Aruba.
Aruba from Twitter, I hope you're doing well. She's always
She's
liking my
pretty
stuff.
great.
Yeah.
She also says technically, Christina Workman has a podcast that focuses on contributors, which is a lot like the concept of WordPress community that we just touched
Oh,
on.
yeah.
Um, what is it called? WP Contribute, I think it's called. I've been on it. I should know. But yeah, that is a really good one.
That's
It is
awesome.
interview style, but yeah, she focuses specifically on like people who contribute to WordPress in some way, even if it's not like formal listed contributor, blah blah blah.
Mm.
And the things that they do to make WordPress happen, to make WordPress great, and it's a pretty great podcast. Recent episodes include Sandy Edwards, Adam Warner, Burjeet, Polly Hack, all very cool people.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely check that out if that was something that Joe said that you find interesting. Um, Yay, cool. Alrighty, well, those are all the questions that we have for today. Um, Joe, thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with me. I'm very aware that these days, being asked to sit on a Zoom call when you don't particularly have to or are not getting paid to is not always the thing that people want to do the most, but I really appreciate your time. Um, where can people, I definitely will link to your podcast, How I Built It. Where else can people find you or connect with you if they would like to? Of
For sure. Well, first of all, Allie, thank you for having me on because I love talking podcasting, and
course.
I will always make time in my schedule for you because you're super swell and you're
Oh,
doing great work in the WordPress community. So,
thank you.
yeah, people can find me over at casabona.org where I kind of laundry list all the fun things I'm working on. Twitter is a good place to tweet at me. I'm at jcasabona there, and I've been really digging Instagram a lot lately. I'm trying to do more like IGTV stuff because it's kind of like quick form videos. So I'll probably start going live over there a couple times a week.
Mhm.
But I'm at jcasabona on Instagram as well.
Nice. Okay, awesome. So before we run, we have to pick our random giveaway winner. And from the magic of the random number generator that I picked, the name that I pick is Christina. Christina Workman. We just talked about Christina Workman. So
Hey.
Christina Workman, you are going to win a Yeti mug from Joe Casabona with his logo on it, and I can definitely vouch. I have one of those, not one of yours, but I have one that I got. It was a speaker gift for WordCamp Boston a few years ago, and
What a
yeah,
great gift. Wow.
it's a fantastic gift. I use it all the time. It's so good at keeping my coffee hot all day long. When I have a cup of coffee right here that's halfway full and super cold because I forgot about it. But if I used my Yeti mug, that wouldn't happen. So,
Yeah.
highly recommend. Congratulations, Christina. We will make sure to email you and make sure that you get your mug in more than enough time. And yeah, that is it. We'll see you all next week. Make sure you go to wpbuffs.com/WP-AMA-series and sign up there to get early access to the next speaker. You get early access to the form to submit your questions for the next speaker, and you are automatically entered to win a prize in a future episode. So the people that we pick for these prizes are people that have signed up. You can only win if you are signed up. If you'd like to find out more about us, go to wpbuffs.com or find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all that fun stuff by searching WP Buffs. And that is it. That is all. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, everybody. And we are no longer live.